Okay, class, welcome to Chapter 4, the electron transport chain, which is the third and final part of the cellular respiration, the third and final step of cellular respiration. So it takes place on the cristae of the mitochondria. Remember, the mitochondria is an organelle, so it has a specific function. The outside, the phospholipid bilayer on the outside, the membrane on the outside is smooth, so it's purple. Right here is the outside. And then on the inside, we have these infoldings called cristae, C-R-I-S-T-A-E, crista for just one of them. And they are infoldings of this inner membrane. And the reason they're infolded, remember, is to increase the surface area for more chemical reactions. So right now we're going to learn about what those chemical reactions are. So if we recall, we began in the cell, in the cytosol, we had glycolysis, which was 10 reactions. We took the glucose, we made it into 2 molecules of pyruvic acid. Then we took the pyruvic acid and we changed it to acetyl-CoA, and we brought it into the center of the mitochondria. I mistakenly said cell in the last video, I meant mitochondria. We take it into the center of the mitochondria where we have the citric acid cycle. Remember, we take oxaloacetate, we add the acetyl-CoA, and we get citric acid. That's why it's called the citric acid cycle. Also in the citric acid cycle, we will make 1 ATP and 2 carbon dioxides for each time it goes around. Also, we're making some other molecules here like NAD+, so and some other things. The one I want you to remember is NAD+, because it is going to carry, it's the role to carry the hydrogen. The role of NAD+ in the cell is as the hydrogen carrier. Some people say the electron carrier, but for our purposes, it's the hydrogen carrier. That's its role in the cell. So it will come from the citric acid cycle to the electron transport chain. Remember, we said the citric acid cycle, we only get 1 ATP, but because we're making NAD+ and other hydrogen carriers, we are going to take them to the electron transport chain and make a lot of ATP. So remember, this is the third step of respiration. The role of the electron transport chain is to complete the breakdown of glucose. Remember, we started with glucose way back in the cell cytosol. That was glycolysis. Releasing carbon dioxide, and I put some questions here because the carbon dioxide is actually released in the citric acid cycle, and also the step that turns the pyruvic acid into acetyl-CoA to get into the citric acid cycle. But that would not be possible without the electron chain, so maybe that's why they're saying it this way. So just learn it this way. The role of the electron transport chain is to complete the breakdown of glucose, releasing carbon dioxide and H atoms, which would be hydrogen ions, is what I think they meant, which it's just a hydrogen atom without its electron. And it does keep the electron at some point, so it's a little tricky there. So we'll just learn hydrogen atoms, and then we will take those hydrogen ions and the electrons, and we will carry them to the cristae of the mitochondria for the electron transport chain. And we're taking the electrons, we're taking hydrogens, and in the electron transport chain, which is actually embedded in the inner membrane of the mitochondria called the cristae, we have some electron carriers. So we keep passing the electrons from these carriers to these electron carriers, which are embedded in the cell. And as we pass them along, the energy gets less and less. Remember, electrons have a lot of energy. They're tiny, but they have a lot of energy. The hydrogens are following them around, the hydrogen ions. Why? Because opposites attract. They're very positive. The electrons are very negative, so they're all there together. So what we do is we pass down the electrons. We use the energy from the electrons to pump the hydrogens across this membrane. We're pumping them into the inside of the cristae, or another way to say it is the inner membrane space. We're pumping them in there. And how are we pumping them? We're using the energy from the electrons. We keep passing the electrons until we get to oxygen. Oxygen is the final electron acceptor. That's why we breathe in the first place. That's why we call this aerobic reactions, and why we call the citric acid aerobic reactions, because that's where we're making the electron and hydrogen carriers. So we're using that, we're pumping these across, they can't get out. Why? Because the phospholipid bilayer, remember we have the phospholipid, the head, which is hydrophilic, water-loving, and on both sides, and then inside we have two fatty acid molecules, which are hydrophobic, water-fearing. So it's lined up this way, and the hydrogens are trapped. They can't get out until they get to this enzyme, which is called ATP synthase, and it's also known as the world's smallest motor because the hydrogens, when they get here, they're going to naturally go across as fast as they can. Why? Because they're crowded in here. They're going from high concentration of hydrogen ions, or protons is another way to say hydrogen ions, remember, because once you take away the electron, it's just a proton. So we're going from high concentration of protons, or hydrogen ions, inside the inner membrane of the cristae to low concentration of hydrogen ions in the center of the mitochondria, which is also called the matrix. And the energy they go across is so great that it actually turns this little motor, and that energy is used to take an ADP, which stands for adenosine diphosphate, which is just an ATP without a phosphate. Because at some point we took off the phosphate. Why? To get energy, because it's a high energy bond. And now we are taking that ADP, we're using the energy from the high concentration of ions to low concentration of ions to turn the wheel and to add a phosphate to the ADP, which makes ATP. ATP is the whole point of cellular respiration, and we are making a lot of ATP because we have a lot of hydrogens. And what are we doing with the ATP? We're using it for cellular energy, for the many processes that cells need energy for. We use ATP. Remember, it's the currency of the cell. So we have the ATP, and this is why we say ATP becomes more abundant during cellular respiration, because the last part of cellular respiration is ATP. And how much ATP are we making? A lot. At least 20, upper 20s, some people even say low 30s, although that's kind of a stretch. So we're making a lot of ATP. And remember, oxygen's the final electron acceptor, and carbon dioxide is a product of the citric acid cycle, but we say the breakdown of glucose releasing carbon dioxide for the electron transport chain, because we take the NAD+, which is the hydrogen carrier. That's its role in the cell. So we're taking it from there, so we kind of include it together, I guess. So then we have the ATP that is made. So that is the end of cellular respiration. It was, what, 4 videos? At least 3. At least 3 videos. So we have learned a lot. And just to review, the catabolism are chemical reactions that release energy. This is catabolism, cellular respiration. We're taking glucose, we're breaking all the bonds. Eventually we have nothing left except for carbon dioxide, which is a waste product, and water, which is made when the oxygen acts as the final electron acceptor, and ATP, which is the energy, which is why we tore things up to start with. So that's catabolism. Remember, anabolism is the opposite, so we're not studying anabolism right now, but these are biochemical reactions that synthesize compounds. So we're making compounds. How do we make compounds? We can put 2 molecules together, we release water. That's called dehydration synthesis. When we're breaking compounds, we will use a molecule of water to break the bond. That's called hydrolysis. And when we do hydrolysis, it releases energy. When we have dehydration synthesis, we are storing that energy. And then to get the energy out, we have to do a lot of work. We have to go through cellular respiration. And then finally at the end, thanks to this one little molecule here, or it's not a molecule, it's an enzyme, we get ATP. So that is the end of that, and I hope to make some more videos tomorrow, but make sure that you watch these videos or listen to them, because they will help you with learning so much material so quickly for chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4. This is chapter 4, by the way.